What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network for the best decks in standard format. The current format is Team Up Through Darkness, Ablaze, and this format is fairly fresh, so the metagame is still developing, but we'll be looking at results from the first week or so of online tournaments, and I'll be talking about what I believe the best decks are based on the quantity and quality of those performances, and I will also be providing you with lists from some top finishers with the respective decks. Before we get into the video, shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get PTCGO codes. Be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off. So we'll be looking at tournament results from 5 different series, totaling 7 tournaments that we're getting these results from. So we'll be looking at results from the Hexter TCG tournaments, the JGB Annual Championship, the PokeX Tag Bolt tournaments, the Hyperlux Gaming 2K event, and the Players Cup Top 16 finals. And I've gotten these sources from my friend Cash over on Twitter, who compiled this data. So if you want to see these kinds of statistics or data, sometimes even before me, I would check out these 3 sources. So Cash over on Twitter, who's also a part of PokeStats, PTCGstats.com, and then also LimitlessTCG.com. These are 3 great resources, and that's where I've been getting my information from. So the first deck we'll be looking at, this is going to be in order, so I think the top deck right now, at least based on the performances from the 7 tournaments I'm looking at here, is Eternatus VMAX. So Eternatus VMAX is from the new Darkness Ablaze set, and it's really just a monster of a card. It has 340 HP, its ability lets you have 8 benched Pokemon as long as all of your Pokemon are dark, and Dread End does 270 damage for 2 energy. The lists are very varied still, since this is a new card, so the deck is fairly new. We've been seeing Dangerous Drill in and out of decks, Scoop Up Nets to allow you to use more Galarian Zigzagoon pings to do more damage, Vitality Band to do more damage, Sable IV as a Zamazenta counter. So the decks are still very varied, or the lists for Eternatus are still very varied, but the one thing that remains, of course, is Eternatus VMAX is very strong, and it's the main Pokemon of the deck. So in the results from August 24th to August 30th, Eternatus VMAX had 3 first place finishes, 2 second place finishes, 5 top 4 finishes, and 8 top 8 finishes. And remember, this is out of the 7 tournaments that I'm looking at for these results. So out of 7 tournaments, Eternatus VMAX won just under half of them. It placed second at 2 of them. It had 5 top 4 finishes totaling, and then 8 top 8 finishes out of 7 tournaments. So Eternatus VMAX is performing very well and consistently, and it's the only deck I have as a choice for the first place in the best decks countdown today. Because it's not only winning tournaments, it's also consistently placing at tournaments. So the finishes that it's been getting, I think the results speak for themselves. Eternatus VMAX is very strong. I think there are plenty of decks with good matchups to Eternatus VMAX. It's just a matter of, do those decks become more popular, more relevant in the metagame, or are they chased out by other decks that they have bad matchups to, and they're not strong enough overall to take down Eternatus VMAX. So we'll have to see if Eternatus VMAX keeps getting these consistent and quality results. But right now, it looks like Eternatus is the best performing deck, and I think it is probably at the top of the format. For our sample list for Eternatus VMAX, I have Luca C's list. Luca placed first place in the Hexter TCG tournament on 8/28, and this was fairly similar to a list that Tord Reklev has shared on Twitter. Except this list does not include any Dangerous Drill, and it does not include any Vitality Band. Dangerous Drill, of course, is really good to get rid of choice Big Charms on ADPZs, or on ADP in ADPZ, and Vitality Band also helps you do the extra damage with Dread End. Luca here decided to use just the 4 Scoop Up Nets as extra damage, and they can also kind of allow you to switch out if you start with a Spiritomb or a Zigzagoon and you don't hit your Dark City. So this list, it's not really anything fancy going on. I think you'll see lists that are fairly similar to this, but I do think Dangerous Drill is picking up a little bit more popularity. There are also some lists that choose to run Piers, some lists that choose to run Pokemon Catcher, but this is a fairly down-the-middle deck list for Eternatus VMAX, so I thought it was a really good one to show here in this video. Next, we have ADP Zacian in the number 2 spot. Now, ADP Zacian, of course, has been around since Sword and Shield came out with Zacian V. It's just two extremely powerful Pokemon that can kind of go together in the same deck due to the metal energy being in common with the attack costs. So ADP Tag Team uses Alter Creation, so your attacks do 30 more damage, and you take an extra prize card when you knock out the active. And then Zacian V has Draw Power and Energy Acceleration in its Intrepid Sword ability, and it has a 3 energy, 230 damage attack. With the Alter Creation buff, it does 260 damage. So these Pokemon just pair to be an almost unstoppable force. But Eternatus VMAX and some of the other VMAX decks can kind of just go over what ADPZ can put out and overwhelm them sometimes. So if it wasn't for Eternatus VMAX, I do think ADPZ might just be running the format, but these two are kind of competing with each other. And as you can see in the results section here, Eternatus VMAX is beating ADPZ in results pretty handedly. ADPZ has 2 top 4 finishes and 9 top 8 finishes, so it is still insanely consistent, getting these 9 top 8s over the course of 7 tournaments that we looked at, and 2 top 4s. So it doesn't have any first place, it doesn't have any second place as of now, but this is a large amount of finishes for a small amount of tournaments. So ADPZ is still very strong. I can't imagine it ever not being on this top decks of the format list as far as the Team Up Through Darkness Ablaze. As many videos I will make for this, I think ADPZ will always be here. It might move up and down, but right now it's at the number 2 spot for this week. And here's a sample list. It's actually my list that I used to get top 8 in the Hyperlux 2K event. This list was previously available to my patrons on patreon.com/CeliosNetwork. All the lists I work on and play are always available to my patrons over there, so just shameless plug. So my patrons had this for however many days I had the list prior to playing it. And I'm always updating my spreadsheets of deck lists and everything over there as well. So the thought behind this list, I can tell you for fact, since it was my list, I wanted to have the 2 big charms to consistently get them down versus Eternatus. Now some were playing Dangerous Drill, so that doesn't always pan out to be effective. And I played 4 Boss's Order because Boss's Order is the win condition of ADPZ. You just want to Gus and knock out support Pokemon, so I played 4 and a Great Catcher just to have as much of the win con in my deck as I could fit. Mawile GX is really great against Eternatus VMAX. It's just good for snagging support Pokemon out of the opponent's hand in general. And Zamazenta V is good because there are a lot of VMAX in the format now. So yeah, this was my ADPZ list. I think it's a fairly basic, fairly consistency-focused list. But there are plenty of ADPZ lists out there because it is a popular deck right now. Next at number 3, we've got Mewtwo Welder. Now, if you asked me if Mewtwo Welder would be here for the Team Up Through Darkness Ablaze standard format best decks, if you asked me this a month ago, I would have said absolutely not, but look at where we are now. So, Mewtwo Welder is still doing very well. It's, you know, you're copying GX attacks from GX Pokemon with the Mewtwo and Mew card because of its perfection ability. We did lose a fair amount of its attackers that it liked to copy with the rotation, but it still uses Reshizard and Charizard GX, and it even has some V Pokemon that fight alongside it, like Victini V and Indeedee V. And Welder is still a great card. You're slapping energy onto the board, drawing some cards, drawing even more with the Dene and Crobat. So Mewtwo and Mew is still putting up some really great results, and it historically has a favored matchup to ADPZ, which definitely helps. So Mewtwo Welder has 2 first places, 1 second place, 1 top 4, and 4 top 8s. So it's not consistently as getting results in the top 8, top 4, but it is going on to win a couple events and even getting a second place out of the 7 tournaments. So Mewtwo Welder, it's honestly very, very close to ADPZ in this countdown. I do want to have ADPZ as the second place because I think it just has more potential going forward, and I think Mewtwo Welder will be countered, which caused me to put Mewtwo Welder into the third place here instead of second. And of course, we'll look at a list for it. This list, I really like this one. It's from Caleb Rogerson. He got top 4 at the Hexer TCG event on 8/28. And this one's actually a Jirachi build, which some players have been moving away from due to a skateboard rotating, but this just runs 3 scoop up nets to make up for getting Jirachi out of the active, and you could also run the Zigzagoon, which scoop up net works really well with. This is the Aurora Energy build. There have also been some Horror Energy builds. With the Aurora Energy build, really, you get to use Tina Chomp Tag Team for its Calamitous Slash attack, and Aurora Energy also helps you discard Pokemon that you want to get into the discard so you can use their attacks. Whereas Horror Energy can sometimes help with getting some extra damage on the active Pokemon. Mewtwo Welder lists are all over the place. I don't think anyone has settled on what the optimal build for it is, whether Aurora or Horror, 9 Energy or 10 Fire Energy, Jirachi or no Jirachi, what attackers to use, what V Pokemon to use. So Mewtwo Welder, I think the perfect list is still out there to be found, but it is getting very good results, and it is still a very strong deck here in the Darkness Ablaze standard format. Next, we have our 4th deck on the countdown, Lucmetal Zacian, which has been a favorite deck of mine ever since Sword and Shield, so I'm pretty happy to see it doing so well. It can be a pretty annoying deck to play against, and it's also the slowest deck, I'd say, in the standard format. It can kind of just sit there and do nothing and be fine with that, because you have the full Metal Wall GX attack to remove energy from your opponent's Pokemon, and then it reduces damage done to your Pokemon for the rest of the game. You have Intrepid Sword, you could just use that and end your turn, draw some cards, maybe excel in energy, and Zamazenta V is also a wall that can attack. So it's a fairly slow and different deck. And it adds a nice flavor to the format that the other decks really don't, because they want to be very aggressive. So Lucmetal Zacian, it got 1st and 2nd place at the Players' Cup Top 16. So it has 1 1st place finish, 2 2nd place finishes, 2 top 4 finishes, and 2 top 8 finishes. So it has very respectable quality and quantity of results in these 7 tournaments we're looking at. I think this will be in the format for a while. I don't see Lucmetal Zacian really getting countered out of the format. I think it'll stay in the top 5 or so for quite a while, unlike Mewtwo Welder, which I think could get countered out of the format. Lucmetal has some pretty great matchup spreads, or pretty great matchup spread. It does struggle a bit to Mewtwo Welder, so if Mewtwo Welder were to rise to the top, maybe Lucmetal Zacian would go down just a bit because of the iffy matchup there. So let's look at a list. This one is from Jake Gearhart, who has just been kind of the poster boy for Lucmetal Zacian as of late. He got top 4 in the Hyperlux 2K. I actually beat him in round 7, and then he went into top 8 at 6-1, and then ended up passing by me into top 4 with the Lucmetal Z list. So there have also been, you'll notice that I'm talking about all of these lists and saying nobody has settled on the correct list really yet, and that's because we're a little over a week into the new format. These lists aren't perfected yet. Nobody's sure what techs you need, what techs you don't, what undiscovered techs are better than the ones we're using. So you'll see this one is using Jirachi and scoop up nets to get the Jirachis out of there. It's using Hoopa as a non-GX, non-V attacker. Eldegoss and Mewtwo for getting supporters back, so it is quite an interesting list. And double Zamazenta V has kind of been the default for all of these. Another interesting thing is that Jake was playing 3 Power Plant. I can only imagine to counter Mewtwo and Mew. So if they don't put down non-Mewtwo and Mew attackers such as Victini or Reshizard, then Power Plant can give them a really big problem. I think my one problem with this list is that it only plays 1 Malodana, and I think I'd prefer 2, but he is playing the Mewtwo and the Eldegoss to get it back, so I'm sure that works out just fine for him. Last but not least, we have Inteleon VMAX. Now, before going over Inteleon VMAX, I do want to say I had planned on Centiskorch VMAX being on this list as well, but just looking at the absolute lack of results it's been putting up, I couldn't rightfully put Centiskorch VMAX on this list when the video is called Best Decks in the Format. So Inteleon VMAX is going to be our 5th and last deck on the list. Inteleon VMAX was really held back prior to this format because Pika-Rom was so strong. Now, one deck usually can't keep a deck out of the format, but Pika-Rom and Bolt Ton decks and Lightning in general just took up such a large chunk of the pie in the meta shares that it was really irresponsible to play Inteleon VMAX. Some people did make day 2. I think like 1 or 2 made day 2 in the Limitless Q3 and Q4 tournaments. But prior to Darkness Ablaze and the rotation, it was really held back by its lightning weakness. Now, Pika-Rom has suffered a major nerf with Thunder Mountain and Electro Power gone. And Inteleon VMAX can kind of rise to the top-ish of the format and show its power. It has 2 really, really great attacks. Hydra Snipe doing 60 damage and then returning an energy to your opponent's active Pokemon into their hand. And then Max Bullet doing 160 and 60, what I've been kind of calling a better Dragapult because it puts out more damage than Dragapult VMAX does. So Inteleon really gets its results from having a favored Eternatus matchup, a slightly favored ADP Z matchup, and then a favored Centiskorch VMAX matchup, which was a little more popular, I'd say, a week ago than it is now. Inteleon VMAX does only have 1 first place and 2 top 4 finishes, but I think that's pretty solid for a deck that was almost non-existent prior to the format, and it's also better than the other decks I had that could possibly go into this 5th spot list. And because Inteleon VMAX variants are favored versus Eternatus, and then depending on lists favored versus ADPZ, I think it really, really deserves the 5th place spot here since Eternatus and ADPZ are my top 2 decks. So we'll look at a list. This is from Tord Reklev in the Players' Cup. He placed top 4. Since the Players' Cup was played over a week ago, this list might be a little outdated. But Tord did play Lapras V as kind of a Zamazenta V counter, and then he played Suicune as a Decidueye counter. Lapras V at the moment is not actually doing too well as a Zamazenta counter since the Lucmetal lists are playing Metal Goggles and Malolanas. The Lapras V could have possibly been a counter for ADPZ with a Zamazenta, but I actually think Zamazenta and ADP is a little less common, and also you can still beat them just by, attacking their other Pokemon, because it's very rare that an ADPZ will be able to get a board with just like an ADP and a Zamazenta down. They usually need Zacian to draw through the early game, and if they don't, you can just swing through their Zamazenta with regular Inteleon Vs. So that is going to be it for the video. This is the list of the best decks. So we had number 1 Eternatus VMAX, number 2 ADP Zacian, number 3 Mewtwo Welder, number 4 Lucmetal Zacian, and number 5 Inteleon VMAX. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not already for more content like this in the future. Let me know if you need any links to the tournaments or to the sources or anything like that. I'll put some of it in the description, but feel free to ask for any resources you need in the comments down below. Leave a like on the video if you did enjoy it because it does help me reach new viewers. And I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.